Welcome to Potentials. This is Leja, and I am very excited to have tonight uh, Damon Riddle and Kat Bayer, and they are both in my group in SALT LLC and part of the Gen Z group. And also, Damon is a Therify operator and also a massage therapist. And Kat Bayer is a sound, what was it again?
I do sound therapy.
Yeah. Sound therapy, yes. So it's interesting because we're all kind of tied together. I into myself, I energetic healing, and that's what my business was when I had it, and I would like to see more of that happening. So this kind of all ties together very nicely with the healing kind of thing. So I would, like to ask both of you, but first I'll start with Damon. What got you started, and what made you interested in this, and how did you, how did you just start with this whole kind of thing?
Well, the massage and manual therapy stuff started sort of out of an amalgamation of a couple of different things. At the time, I was working at a bar and sort of not really happy about stuff. And my wife started going to college for occupational therapy. And like most people, I said, well, what the heck is that? Everybody knows physical therapy and whatever else, but occupational therapy. And when she said, well, I help people improve their quality of life, I was like, that sounds a lot better than, going to a bar every day and making a living off people drinking and whatever. So
Right.
it started, the wheels turning in my head. And at the time I was actually doing a lot of weird, studies in different philosophies and shamanic things, quantum mechanics as well. And so there's a weird sort of joining of forces that came together there that made the foundation of me going, if I can use my hands and my intention and my knowledge to then manifest health for somebody else, like that sounds really cool. Like, let me go and explore that. I didn't know if I was going to do it for a living or anything, but it just sounded cool. And so I was very fortunate that there was a excellent school near me called the Connecticut Center for Massage Therapy that was dynamite back in the day. So in 2004 and 5, I trained in their wellness program. So they, we covered a lot of ground that incorporated all of this stuff that was not just, massage by numbers kind of thing, but also philosophies of health and healing and mostly how to take care of yourself. I was in what was called the wellness track. And so that was a huge gift for me and for my life because it was really filled in a lot of the gaps of like how to be a full human being, beyond the escaping the matrix sort of thing. So it really was this huge moment in my life that taught me everything I needed to know leading to today. And that was, again, 2004 or 5. And it was able to help me create a productive way forward for me in the healing arts, if you will. And so I took that and I stuck around the school for a while as a TA. I went back later, and from 2010 to about 15 or so, I was a teacher there. So I taught anatomy, physiology, some of the hands-on stuff, energetic foundations, and pathology. And so, I had a lot of fun. Honestly, I was just like a dork hanging around the school. I think I was there so much, they were like, we should probably just hire this guy. I probably would have done it for free anyway, but glad they didn't know that. But yeah, so it just started a love of exploring these things and being able to tap into the potentials that we have and that we can bring forth for the benefit of others. I'm all about sort of that balance of even exchange, and so I'm more than willing to go and help somebody and work with them to do, as much as I can to help them. And so making a living doing that has been a real blessing. It's been great. So that's sort of my background in that. And it's led through a couple of different permutations, but the main thrust of what I was doing for a long time was orthopedic therapy. So doing a lot of like working alongside chiropractors and physical therapists, helping people to either avoid surgeries or recover from them, because I worked with a lot of athletes and a lot of, physical trainers and like I said, PTs and stuff, just rehabbing knee replacements and shoulder work and you name it. And so underneath all that, though, there was always and there is still always understanding of the sort of energetic and spiritual side of who that person is and how that plays into how well or not they are healing or recovering. And so being a part of that process has been a lot of fun. And so that's where, you know, my background and sort of specialty, I guess, lies, and what led me to here. And then the Therify is a totally different part of the story, but it gets off of that, you know, pretty directly. But I'd love to hear some of what Kat's got for a background.
Yes, I would
Oh,
also
boy.
like to hear that.
Well, I have kind of avoided this question for quite a while because I wasn't quite sure what to say. I've been, I guess you could say, floundering for a good part of my youth and even through college. I do have a degree, but I was not a very good student at the time. I think I didn't really start learning about life and what I wanted until maybe even my late 30s. When I have a degree in geology, and I ended up doing graphic design out of college because, well, that's a long story. And that led to technical illustration, led to medical illustration, led to graphic design. And, but I was still floundering. I think what really set me on a path, even though I didn't know it at the time, was I've always had a really, really, really strong spiritual base. And so even though I never really discussed it or made it, you know, I wasn't part of any groups, but when there was a time in my life that I had an internal yearning for a teacher. I needed more than what was going on in my life. And I kind of prayed for a teacher, and I ended up with the Sufi teacher. And
Nice.
yeah, and so I was part of this school for quite a number of years, and I still feel very connected to it, even though I'm not really attending the classes right now. But that began my my journey of well, I always had the internal search, but that really got it going, and I then became a student of me, learning why I was the way I was, about all of the dysfunction I went through in my life, through my family, through my teens, through my 20s. I floundered and didn't really know what it was I wanted to do. And then I started singing in a Sufi choir, and I started realizing I had the urge to do sound healing. But there was no real classes at the time. So the first thing I began was I learned, I got a certification in cranial sacral trauma release. And that taught me a lot about myself. And of course, when you start the healing process, there's a lot of stuff that comes up. So I had to go through a lot of learning, a lot of learning. And actually, I feel like a lot of that has come full circle just in the last 5 years, where I actually feel like a whole human being. You know, I know what I'm doing. I know where I want to go for the most part. You know, I still have some questions. But I did get trained in different alternative healing fields. I actually got a certification in environmental landscaping. I had a yoga wear business. I did a bunch of different things. But most recently, I got a 2-year degree in sound healing. And that gave me, and we were each asked to do a research project, and mine, I decided, was consciousness in related to sacred geometry, consciousness, and sound. And so that really got me in the something I'd always had an interest in, but didn't really have a way to explore. You know, it's not like there's groups, you know, it's hard to find this type of information and so I was so grateful when I finally ran across Dave Rossi and the Generation Z and met you guys. And I feel like we've kind of become family. I feel really, really comfortable. And the amount of learning that has, I don't know, it's so encompassing. It just feels so real, but
Yes.
it's not anything we learned, you know? So it's like learning a whole new language,
Right.
you know, of what life is. So, and I'm learning who I am in the process. And I feel kind of like a whole person that I never felt like before. So that's a
Well,
kind of,
that's just beautiful. I love that. I feel like that is like it all connects, like everything is connected, right?
Yeah, and I didn't know why I did all these different things, but somehow all of these different things that I learned come together now, for
Yeah,
now, for
right.
something. There's a purpose, there's a reason, and still figuring out what that is, but I'm in the right place at the right time with the right people.
Yeah.
Mm.
I feel you completely. I feel the same way. And Damon, you can jump in if you want.
Oh, I feel the same way, like 100%, 110%, because yeah, this whole process, like you said, it is all connected at certain points, you know, and we each bring our own perspective. And you guys have heard me soapbox about this, but it's, you know, I think that's the beautiful part about this is that we each have our own lens of which we see this through and our own experiences to bring to it. And as we connect these bridges and understanding, as we connect these terms in this language to one another in the best and most efficient ways for each other, that just strengthens the whole momentum of us learning and sharing this information with everyone else too, you know, because there is a lot of, again, I love Dave. I actually had jumped in with Dan Winter a few years ago, exploring the therapy in regards to using it for my own health situation, my own cancer situation, which was successful, which, you know, again, it opened up this whole door of like, okay, well, for about a year and a half or so, I was diving really hard into Dan's information. It sounded really good, but it was like, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a physicist. I can just, you know, feel my way through this. So as much as I'm trying to learn his terms and writing this down and, you know, pretending I'm an electrical engineer, none of that stuff really hit home until it was sort of proven out in my MRIs that this mechanic he's talking about, that this process he's defined, that this machine, this device, this process that it evolves or involves, excuse me, is one that's super profound. And the more you get into it, the more it's like, wow, like this really touches everything, you know? And so for me, then I saw Dave and Dan have their first couple of conversations, and it was like, wow, this Dave kid really, you know, clicks. I dig his vibe, you know, homo Canadian guy. Eh? So, you know, that's all good. But there was just something that was like, yeah, I should really reach out and you know, be a part of that too. And so connecting with him has been exactly what I needed when I needed, you know, to put these things together from a mathematical physics, you know, concept idea to then bring the physiology to it was like, you know, because now I'm starting to see stuff like all over the place connecting, and it's just really mind blowing. And so
it's the fractal nature of everything.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It just keeps going and spinning, and you could stare at it for hours, you know, days. But it's, you know, it's super fun, but it's also, like I said, very important stuff. And so to have a group, you know, to Kat's point, I'm super appreciative too, because, you know, we're all on a little island, you know, our own little spot, trying to figure out, you know, how to shout across the ocean. They're like, hey, but we're all speaking different languages, you know, but we're starting to bring it together. These conversations we have, you know, in a few of our different groups is getting more easy. I think it's getting more coherent, and that's only happening, you know, through our efforts, but it's also because people as a whole, I think, are starting to up their ability to let go of some of those preconceived notions that we were brought into this with, and really start to picture like how this could work, how all this fantastical, magical stuff could have a real physics, definition. Excuse me. I taught a class called Energetic Foundations for a number of years that was, you know, Reiki, polarity therapy, a lot of energetic, you know, just ideas.
Right.
That was way harder than trying to convince people about pathology or like massage techniques or body mechanics or any of that boring stuff. People are resistant, man. It's crazy.
To the invisible.
Well, yeah, the Western mindset really suppresses or not even so much suppresses, but it just laughs off the idea, you know. And I think that's kind of interesting because to me, I look at something like traditional Chinese medicine, you know, which I dabbled in a little bit, but I'm by no means an expert. But I mean, that's got 6,000 years of experience behind it, and it works. So like, why are we not thinking about this too? And so that's always been in the back of my mind anyway. But as we have come along in these physics, you know, that I've explored and different paradigms and stuff have shifted, there's no difference. Like traditional Chinese medicine is totally on point, just like Western medicine is totally on point. They're just different layers of the same map, different levels of the system, and understanding all of them and how they interact and sort of influence and cohabitate to make us us.
Yeah, and we're just electrical beings, just like in physics.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if everything, to Anthony Peratt's point of everything in the universe is 99.9991 hydrogen platinum. Well, we're a big bunch of hydrogen too. I mean, we're what, 70% water? That's, last I checked, 2/3 hydrogen. So, there's a lot to be said about the fractal nature of us in the universe and life itself. So the big aha moment for me was when I started looking, not at the biological stuff, but then out to the cosmic stuff and going, wait a second, it's the same structures. It has the same function, sort of. Does that mean we're living in a big fractal organism? And that's where stuff gets fun for me.
Yeah.
Because I can make sense of that more than I can make sense of like a big mechanical clock and, the mindless, uncaring universe, and we're just blips of, nothing, and nothing matters. I'm not down with that.
No.
I like the connection of the metaphysics with the physics. I like seeing them combined and creating this kind of hybrid that actually works in a practical way.
And it actually does. It seems like anytime you look at something small, you can see a model of it in a gigantic scale, and vice versa. And so to learn one, if you learn one, you learn the other, and you can go and prove it scientifically.
Yeah, I mean, we've had specific conversations about some of this stuff recently, and the connections are profound between, like I said, microtubules and DNA to a galactic filament. For example, it's taking the like I said, the woo, if you will, and putting a physics to it is so awesome. Because like you guys, I mean, I've always been into weird stuff. I entertain myself with sci-fi and fantasy, and I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons and whatever, and I loved it. And it's great. However, as time has gone on and I've gotten more open and more understanding of these things, there is an absolute physics to it, And so all of these experiences that we've had, they're all purposeful in my mind because they're leading us to this understanding place. And I think that's a beautiful thing we have been able to find, and I'm sure more people are coming to this, that, people want to know. We want to have something exciting to explore again. I feel like a lot of people feel like, oh yeah, we conquered, physics, general relativity. We've been to the moon, maybe,
Then what about consciousness? I mean, and the experiments that show we affect anything we look at.
Yes.
That's why they have to do double-blind experiments, because we affect everything we're interacting with.
Yeah, for sure. You can't subtract the observer from the experiment being observed, for sure. But yeah, to your point, it's one of the things, as I've been working with the Therify and trying to speak to like doctors and explain to them what it's doing and how it's working, their concepts are very much based in a different thing altogether. Like they don't want to think about this stuff. So I just keep with, some of the biochemistry and some of the things that they can grasp. But I'm getting a lot of them now coming back like, wait a second. Like if you're talking about this negentropic phase conjugate, process, doesn't that mean, da, 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 da. And it just starts to open up some interesting conversations, and planting these seeds, people are going to start turning around and going, oh, wow, so this is really how things work,
You want to explain the basics of that negentropic process?
Yes. So to my audience, just in case.
Yeah, for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So I say it so often these days. I'm like, oh yeah, negentropic conjugation. Yeah, right? The Therify specifically is a sort of fourth or fifth generation, depending on how you count it, EMF, bio EMF, plasma. I can't say healing device, but cellular rejuvenation device. If that steps aside from it, because again, healing is a strong word. I don't claim any healing properties, prowesses in that regard.
Organizing.
Yeah, it's a self-organizing. Yeah, that's where the rejuvenation comes from.
Restructuring, perhaps, like restructured water in a way, in a way.
Well, yeah, Therify. Yeah, it's part of what it does is structure water. And this is where it gets tough to explain it in totality, because it's a layered system. It's bringing aspects of what Reif and Lakhovsky were doing and combining it with what Priori was doing, and then adding what Dan Winter defined as the proper wave guide to make the most symmetrically structured water for that purpose. And not just water, but structured energy field. So the plasma field itself is doing the work, and you don't need much more than that, which Antoine Priori showed in the 70s. And you guys can, look that up when you want. But Antoine Priori was a French doctor in the 70s who pioneered plasma, cold atmospheric plasma specifically, as a method to, at first, clean medical equipment that they didn't want to take apart. So they would bathe it in plasma, and very antimicrobial, very antibacterial, very health supporting. Creates great oxygen and nitrogen species, what they call reactive oxygen and nitrogen species.
I could put that in the description as well if you want to give me a link to that later.
Oh yeah, sure. And all this stuff can be found at therify.net. So,
okay.
Does this organizing happen at the level of DNA?
It happens at the nano level. His equation actually goes to Planck, right? So it means it should be resonating and affecting you all the way down to molecular level of every point in you. So DNA certainly falls in that category, But yeah, so the process that the Therify has over everything else right now, which some people are starting to catch on to, is that phase conjugation to create a process of what they call neg entropy or reverse entropy. So phase conjugation is just simply taking two signals and having them join together in such a way that they perfectly embed within one another, so that the signal is coherent going backwards and forwards in time. So it's a way of constructively embedding those two waves to be coherent in totality, right? Both in time and space as it goes. It's something that's, again, I say, oh, that's easy, but you can picture an idea of sort of, when you look at a mirror, those are your photons bouncing off and coming back. But that mirror image is flipped, right? You hold up something in your right hand, it looks like your left hand, and everything is backwards. If you write something, a phase conjugate signal or a phase conjugate mirror specifically would be a mirrored reflection that's not flipped. It would be coming back to you so that you could understand it if you were looking here or there, right? So that coherence of information going back and forth is critical to how how the universe actually works at the speed of thought, if you will. Because then you combine that with the process of making a longitudinal wave, and then you have longitudinal phase conjugate signals, and then you can talk about solitons as biophotons and all this other methods that our body uses to then do this stuff naturally. The Therify is doing this in mimicking, right? It's creating a field of plasma that immerses you in what can be best described as sort of life force or chi, or prana, or whatever analogy or sort of term you like there. And so it's a pulsing chi field that's driving your cells back towards, to Kat's point, and to tie on this, neg entropy is another word for the process that starts off self-organization. So neg entropy or reversing entropy means you're going the opposite direction to decay and going back towards order, right? So in a spin situation, if you think about a top or a gyroscope that's wobbling as it slows down, you're speeding it back up so that it evens out again. And so and in that process, something like a DNA double helix, if the ends of your telomeres are getting a little unraveled or unruly or whatever, any sort of kinks in that DNA chain, or something in your cell membrane, for instance, is maybe too much inflammation is distending it. Now you get this compression that's creating a scenario where you're re-engaging the proper shape and function of those structures. So you can retie telomeres and sort of help them lengthen. You can reduce cell inflammation. You can induce apoptosis in cancer cells. Those kinds of things are within the wheelhouse. And so Therify specifically, that phase conjugate negentropic potential that it taps into, potentials, is so amazing, and it opens up the door for not just a different way of approaching health and healing, but also for starting to understand the bigger questions, like Kat and Leisure brought up, of consciousness itself, of spirit itself, of, you know, some of these energetic processes in these systems, you know. So I think we talked the other day, and some of your watchers may understand that we have a system of tissue in our body called your fascia, your myofascial system. That myofascial system is super important for these biophotons and for these phase conscious signals. You know, they're created there, they are transmitted there, their information is stored there. That fascial system is your traditional Chinese medicine meridian system. It is what makes up a part of your chakral system as well. You know, so these systems are starting to come together, not just from the past and present. With this future information, it's all starting to come into this clear picture of like how we can approach all of this stuff and tie it together and start to teach like quantum physiology and quantum healing. And what does that really mean? You know, so
the fascia is like a circuit, a signal generator, a signal carrier, electricity carrier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, among other things. Yeah, I mean, if you look it up, they'll tell you that the fascial system is a connective tissue, which it is.
Right.
It wraps all of the muscles and organs in our body in a single continuous sheath. It just has different layers, you know, and sort of weaves and wafts around the whole body. But when you get down to it, it's a semi-liquid piezoelectric, basically quasi-crystal, right? And so those folds and those weaves in your fascial system, as they're going around different muscles and as they're reaching different junction points and pinch points and cross points, again, that's why your meridian system has those points, right? Because those are major sort of intersections, you know? And so, yeah, that system is a part of how we generate and transmit and possibly receive signals. You know?
And crystals are where we not only can send signals through, but they can hold information, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the photons can hold information and transfer it from one place to another, whether it's through a pathway or even through quantum entanglement, right?
Yeah, great. Yeah, correct. Yeah, and that's you know, again, when we talk about consciousness and like what is consciousness, one of the biggest things that defines consciousness is its ability to store information and then ponder it later, you know, because then you can think about something that happened in the past and make plans for it in the future if it comes up again, right? That's a pretty magical scenario, you know. We create retro causality, they call it. So
I still keep going back to the blinking universe, like we keep creating our reality moment by moment. And as we're blinking in, we're in this form, but as we blink out, we're in potential, right?
Yes.
And as long as we stay in the same frame of reference to where we were when we were blinked in before, we're going to blink in the next. So how do we reach those in-between points to reprogram and you know what I mean?
The potential section of it. Right?
Yeah.
How do we find those gaps and then exert leverage? You know,
right there you go.
Like from an observer standpoint, from a physics standpoint. That's basically what it's all about in my mind. It's, you know, finding the place in our consciousness to be able to separate between sort of our primal response and our autonomic response, or sort of automatic response, that stores all that information that's happened in the past. It's usually in the form of traumas, because what's it trying to do? It's trying to keep you from dying, you know? And so that's a priority for sure. But beyond that, like when we stay in that fight or flight or in that sort of primal state, you're not thinking about the higher level stuff. You're just reacting on what your body feels. If you can get past that, even just for a couple of breaths, and find a gap between how you feel in a reaction to something that's automatic because of previous experience, and then make a separate sort of decision from that point to either go sort of lean into your instinct or separate from it and make a different decision, or no decision, because that's another decision.
And then how does that information come out of that place of non-being, you know, in between blinks? Isn't it, this is where I get really curious about how consciousness actually projects sacred geometry to put the information into where we want it to be expressed.
Mm.
But how did, I mean, I'm not sure how that happens, but it feels like that's where it happens.
I feel like it's when
Right?
you're in the moment, and also when you're meditating, right? Because then you're not thinking any thoughts at all, like when you're meditating. So you're able to get in that potential spot where you're just in the now. You're not in the past or the future. You're just right now, and then staying in that in the breathing that Damon was talking about. Keeping that breath is so key. I feel like.
Well, and I also think that, in my experience, I remember the first time I was being taught to meditate and being told about this like gap, as they used to call it. She used to say surfing the gap. You got to find the gap, see if you can surf the gap. And I'm like, okay, let me try that. And, I'd sit there for 5 minutes and be like, okay, I'm bored, or whatever. But the first time it happened, I remember it was like a pop. I was like, I popped out of my own cycle, my own feedback loop, and was able to sort of surf above it and sort of look down and be like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm feeling this way because maybe this and this and this from my past, but it's today, it's right now. Like, I don't have to react like I want to react. I can do something else that's probably better for this situation to turn out more positive, And so once I started being able to do that, I was like, oh, wow, like I don't have to just fly off the handle and be a slave to my own, ego or anger or, jealousy or whatever was coming up. Because a lot of that stuff, is also that programming, the ego, the survival mechanisms. Like a lot of this stuff is reactionary, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to go along with it.
Well, it sounds like you reached a point that allowed you to detach from that,
Yeah. Yeah. And so being that sort of detached observer, being stoic, that kind of thing, and not just realizing that I had that control, or that I didn't even notice that, I didn't know there was sort of a third setting, a third gear, if you will. It was just sort of feeling, react, thinking about this stuff, react. It wasn't like feeling, pause, think about it, react. It was just, so now it builds in an extra step or two where it's like, okay, now I can, instead of just seeing the one way, it's like, wait, you can branch this out in all kinds of ways,
That makes sense.
It's almost like somebody hands you a remote, and you can press pause. You can press the pause
It's also
button.
like somebody had a couple of different TVs and put them in front of me and was like, okay, you can go this way, this way, this way, that way. It just depends which, how you feel today.
And also it's the same thing as like trying to explain to somebody how a remote works when they don't know anything. They know it works, right? Because they can use it. But if you try to explain it, well, how does it work? Well, you press the button. Well, then why does it turn things on and why does it turn things off? How does that work? It's something you have to have faith in and believe. You see it happen, but you don't know how it works unless you're, into electronics and you do understand all of that.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good analogy to sort of explain Kat's point about the sacred geometry of consciousness and all that stuff that we're emanating, because we do that too. Like our internal oscillations, if you will, our resonance field, our aura, again, chakras, rainbow light body, whatever analogy you like, is that. I mean, we are harmonically resonating out into our, not just our biofield, but beyond, and we resonate. Again, if our cells are capable of reaching that Planck scale by themselves, and we can control that, then we resonate, we are embedded within the universal cloth, so to speak. Like we can't separate from that. So can we better manage ourselves to tap into that and be more efficient with it and be more controlled with it and not be so in fear about these concepts of spirit and, these maybe, non-physical entities that live beyond our perception or dimension.
It reminds me of a fish that doesn't know it's in water because that's all it knows. So we're in this field that we're interacting with constantly. And I think that's, even if you get close to somebody, you can feel or think what they're thinking or feel what they're feeling, or, everybody knows the story of you walk into a room after somebody had an argument, nobody's speaking a word, but you can feel it in the air, so we're in this field that we're interacting with constantly. And once we become aware of that, then we can start to have, I think, more control over these gaps, because we understand that we're in this field of creation, I guess you could say, that we're constantly creating. We don't even know we're constantly creating, but we're doing it every moment, every breath, every blink.
Every thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Every
sure.
reaction. Yeah.
Yeah, again, it gets back to that fractality, fractal
Mhm.
consciousness, fractal, holographic universe, simulation theory, all that stuff. We're talking about all the same stuff. It's pretty beautiful, actually. When I was learning TCM, it was a traditional Chinese medicine, excuse me. Excuse me. I was struck by first how complicated and how different the language was and the ideas and stuff. But once I got past that, you start to see the system itself and how beautifully interwoven it is.
Mhm.
It speaks to that balance of sort of forces. Like there's a reason for entropy and there's a reason for neg entropy. It's all about sustaining, the balance between, so the yin and yang is not just a Taoist metaphor. Like it's a real process. It's speaking to much more of reality. And that's the thing too. Some of these ancient cultures knew more about this stuff than we do. We're just starting to rediscover what they knew thousands of years ago. And that fascinates me too, because, again, it's just like parallel, confirmation.
That yin yang shape recently came out in that article that was took a picture of a photon spinning, and that was a single photon, but it looked like two of them spinning around, but it was
Right.
one. And maybe you can explain that better, but that's like the essence of yin yang.
Well, yeah, right. And so, we've discussed this in some greater detail, and I'll just brush on it now. But when we talk about embedding electromagnetic fields with spin and counterspin, if you can get that, and so the photon is basically a boson or a quasi-particle of electromagnetism. Everything is electromagnetism. I'll just put that out there now. So the photon specifically, if you get those cross points of matter and antimatter to collect together coherently, you've got a yin yang, right? So the more complicated geometries you can embed within one another, the more complicated the geometry will be. But essentially, when you get everything down to its base, like hydrogen being the sort of base element, if you will, it's a fractal. It is a perfect fractal symmetry, and that's what allows it to do what it does, because it gives you the perfect sort of folding and infolding, outfolding and infolding potentials. I feel like we should do the Pee Wee Herman every time. But no, but seriously, it does. It gives the proper geometry necessary to do more things with it than otherwise. So that fractality is a crucial component, along with that phase conjugate neg entropy.
So yes.
Do you want to explain the kissing pine cones? Like this seems to be like the core of everything we're looking at, right?
Well, again, yeah, it's talking about, so when you say pine cones kissing noses, if you think about, again, the interferometry thing, the phase conjugate thing, when you're bringing two lasers together or 2 points of energy together, again, interferometry, interfering, you get them to bang together. If you get them lined up where, the tips of them, the pine cone, so to speak, are coming together at such an accurate level and spinning in the proper direction to each other, which would be sort of counter, so you flip one upside down, then you have a perfect sort of joining point for energy to embed within one another. So it's the first step to creating what we were talking about with those embedded EM fields, right? Because you got to line them up perfectly before you can slip them inside of one another. And they have to have the right geometry so that they can do it constructively and build momentum, as opposed to sort of burst in the bubble,
Is it kind of like the Merkaba, where there's two pyramids that are opposite and then merging, and they're both spinning clockwise and counterclockwise?
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. Yeah, yes, it is. The Merkaba, I think, I was talking to another person in the group, and in my mind, the Merkaba is the sort of next step beyond the kissing noses and where they fully conjugate.
Oh, right. They don't just do this, they go past. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then they sort of are stabilizing one another in that spin and counterspin. And so the geometry inside of that, if you think about putting those two pyramids together, what you get on the inside when they're perfectly joined is an octahedron, right? It's an 8-sided dice for you Dungeons and Dragons fans out there. But the internal lattice structure of that makes a perfect interferometric sort of nest, if you will, an array that allows for perfect interferometry, perfect phase conjugation to happen. So if you think about it, then, being a seat, or, a little place where you can plant a seed of plasma or awareness or consciousness or whatever, that would be the shape you would want for a perfect plasma trap that would be coherent and consistent. And then you could use it and shift it around, fly, like Dronvala Melchizedek, whatever. Talk about your Merkaba and,
Dronvala Melchizedek, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I can't pronounce that. But but yeah, no, that's exactly what we're talking about here. And I'm sure there's a lot more that we could talk about in terms of geometries and what you can do with them. But
well, I was thinking of the ellipses too. Like the ellipse in the middle, like you take the toroid field, for example, how all planets are toroids and Earth is a toroid field. Where in the middle of the center there's the ellipse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that
yeah,
field,
Pisces.
The Vesica Pisces, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, if you guys after this, if you take a look at something called the Doughtrey set, the Doughtrey set, it's a mathematical sort of rendering of their best guesstimate, I suppose, of what the background substructure looks like, and it's a field of fractal field of toroids, and it's pretty astounding when you see how they're figuring this stuff, because it fits into exactly what Dave talks about, what Dan talks about, what Nassim Harriman talks about, what Ken Wheeler talks about, what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These guys are all coming at it and sort of circling the wagons in their own perspective fields and perspectives, I suppose. But they haven't quite all come to a conclusion. They're all still kind of figuring out what to do with it, and that's where we come in, because I like digging on information for information's sake, but I like applying it that much more. I want to be productive with it. That's why I got into massage therapy. It's great to think about this stuff as like, oh, well, I wonder if, but it's way more fun to actually do it,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And see the payoff,
Right. Seeing actually people walk out feeling better, and people
Yeah,
getting
exactly.
their ailments going away. It's awesome.
Mhm.
There's nothing better than that.
And I still want to keep tying it. I mean, yes, I see the biology and the science of it, but I still want to keep tying it to our consciousness and our intention and our beliefs and
Mindset.
yeah, I mean, the thing that's kind of was tricked out of us when we were children, we were all born with this knowledge that was not supported, so we moved on to what we were taught, and then we kind of forgot where we came from. And I think we don't have to depend on technology, although it's kind of nice because it helps teach us things. I mean, just like that whole
it's the training wheels is what I call it. Yeah.
But also the fractal nature of it. If it works here, it's going to work here too, if we understand the elements and how they mirror each other.
Yeah.
So I keep going back to Damon, when you were talking about microtubules. I remembered the Google computer video when they actually were able to create a stable wormhole.
Mm-hmm.
And is that how we not only communicate within our own being? I mean, aren't there certain reactions in the physical body that doesn't take any time to go from here to here? It's timeless, it's instantaneous. And then there's the DNA experiment where they have it miles apart, and you touch one and the other one reacts. And so there's so much more to this than the physical circuitry. And I'm interested in that part.
Well, and to your point about the that video we watched, that I tried to explain this to our friend Gary, and the microtubule is actually the tubulin. They call alpha and beta tubulin. There's two little pieces of the microtubule, and those flex and open and close all the time and do it, fast and spooky, really.
Right.
But that microtubule action is the basis of what they built quantum computer qubits on. So the ability to be in superposition of a computer qubit is based off of our microtubules. So when they're working with these things and they're going, oh, we got 25 of these qubits to work together coherently, it's like, ooh, I got, 50 million in my head. Like, so just put that in perspective. But yeah, it definitely, it speaks to opening up the potentials within us to basically do everything that we've ever heard of as magic or spooky or whatever in a way that's actually definable, measurable, repeatable, and safe, because we can understand what these things are, and to our benefit, honestly, which is, I think, where the biggest problem has been that a lot of this stuff has been kept away for reasons I'm sure that are somewhat valid, but at the same time, it's such a hindrance for us to be using this technology and relying on it more than we need to. Like, technology is great, but it's not everything,
Right.
At some points, I almost feel like like AI is already here; it's already taken over, because everybody spends so much time on their screens. Everybody's, with that technology, what can you even do?
Right.
I don't have,
Being lazy in a way,
I mean, I think there's a certain amount of benefit we can have from AI. It makes our lives easier, to do, mundane work that maybe we don't want to do. And it kind of can springboard us into learning more things, but ultimately it has to come back to us, because I'm certainly not going to have any implants. I don't want to hook myself up to anything or be programmed by anything. I think, we have that capability. We just need to learn how to tap into it.
Yeah, sure. I totally agree. The Therify is nothing more than what a medical Qigong practitioner would do also, or what a group distance healing would do, or what I would do with my hands. It's just a souped up version of it. So in that respect, yeah, it's necessary. It's good because it makes us more productive. That means we have more time. That means we can do more things that are satisfying to us and, productive for the whole, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As well. But yeah, at the same time, it's kind of a double-edged sword. And I think to Lisa's point, it's making us lazy. It's making us a little too comfortable. It's making us a little too ignorant and not understanding even how those things work. Therefore, they sort of control us. You know what I mean? So if I know how to use a screwdriver, like, then the drill is, I'm sorry, this is a terrible analogy, but if I don't understand how it works, then like I said, I'm a slave to that tool,
Right. That part I understand. It's important to know basics. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But it always comes back. I'm in the same boat as you, Kat. It always comes back to me with like consciousness. And again, that comes out of my experience with the cancer and stuff, being a brain tumor and having things sort of having my central nervous system scrambled a couple times. It leaves you in a weird place, especially with being somebody who does the work I do, where I'm very aware of my body. I'm very aware of, energies. I'm very aware of things in space, my own body in space and that sort of thing, what they call proprioception. And I got totally jacked up, back in 2018 and even back in 2006 initially. And when I had my second surgery in 2018, the left side of my body was like 85-90% weak and without sensation. So it took a good 6 or 8 weeks before I could even bear weight on that left side. So I was no stairs. I didn't drive for about a year, that kind of stuff. So you have a lot of time. I had a lot of time to lay around. I did a lot of sleeping. That was fun. But just the place it left me, was really exploring and experiencing the difference between sort of mind and consciousness, or sort of the physical brain and the spiritual self, and it's hard to explain, but even though I couldn't really move much of my left side for that 6-8 weeks, I could still inhabit it. You know what I mean? I could still bring my awareness to it. I could still feel it. I could still move it, but it took a lot more effort. So it felt like I had to like spiritually like strain more. You know what I mean? Like it was a flex. And that was interesting because it's like, well, what is that? Am I trying to fire nerves? Not really, because the nerves there, the efferent nerves there are gone. So that isn't it, so what is it? And yeah, as the brain starts to sort of do its plasticity thing and rebuild, but that's a years-long process I'm still going through, so it gave me a chance to explore the difference between, sort of mind and brain in a way that not unique, but it certainly cost me a lot to get that experience. But it's one that now gives a certain perspective that's super useful for this type of work and exploration. because I'm with you. Like, what is that? Like, what was that sort of spiritual side of me receiving into the physicality of me that couldn't then use the wires and pulleys that my physical body uses? You know, so there was a disconnect on the energy or spiritual side of things that just was, you know, the problem. It wasn't anything. I never changed through any of this. Like, I never, my personality, you know, memory's taken a hit or whatever, but like the me that I feel never changed. You know, the ability to move me, the body that's me, that changed, but not me, you know? So I always thought that was really interesting. And so it's been a exploration born out of that stuff that's really kept me trying to understand more and more, you know, aside from just being a dork. I like it.
Hey, being a dork is great. It's
It's
I
fun.
agree.
Yeah.
Well, we're three dorks, and and we're having a great conversation. But I'm going to wrap this up a little bit now because we've been talking for quite a while, and it's been wonderful though. And I thank you both for coming on and sharing your stories with me and with my beautiful audience, and all the potentials that can be out there. And every time we say potentials from now on, we're definitely doing the Pee Wee Herman thing.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm sure Damon too. Thank you. Nice to be able to chat together like this.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you,
Yeah,
Damon.
definitely agree. Thank you, Leisha, and thanks, Kat. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
I agree.
Well, we'll have to do this again sometime, and thank you for watching, everyone. Ciao for now.